all of us sitting here can decide that we are going to define ourselves primarily on the base of the fact that we are part of one race.
So if we want to bring about the change that we need to desire in companies, we need to change mindset and behaviors. So we can't just focusing on behaviors alone.
So leadership is about identifying potential, attach value to it, and develop it to the maximum.
I came across a quote by a Russian author, but ultimately what he says about work is this: if one wanted to crush and destroy a man, to mete him out the most terrible of punishments, all that one would have to do is make him do work that was completely and utterly devoid of usefulness and meaning.
I think the important thing is, what I'm trying to say is, you lead automatically because you're born to lead. You don't lead automatically because you're appointed to lead. Such a privilege to chat to you today. Actually, I want to talk about the subject of hope, but in the context of restoring hope. And maybe just to start off with, probably where I find hope the easiest and where I identify it and see it the most is in children. So we've got 3 kids. Who's got kids that are here? Okay. So we've got 3 kids. We've been blessed with a 21-year-old, with a 14-year-old, and with a 12-year-old. But sometimes the biggest blessing is just to have a reprieve from them, so that when my wife and I are on our own. And even there, we sometimes get struck by the kids just coming into our space. So my wife and I went away over the weekend, and we're sitting in this beautiful place, and we're having this amazing lunch, and it's just amazing. We're sitting outside, it's beautiful, it's in a place that we've never been before, and all of a sudden there's a noise. Now, I don't know whether you know the app called Zello. You know the app called Zello? So we live in a small holding, so sometimes we've got a few problems on the small holdings, and we use Zello because when you touch it, doesn't matter whether somebody's phone is off or whether somebody's phone is on silent, immediately you can hear. So I'm peering into my wife's eyes, I'm whispering sweet nothings to her. We're on this amazing place we've always wanted to go, and then I hear my phone crackling with the little one going, "Papa kom in, Papa kom in." And I thought I was hearing voices, and I'm like, did I just hear that? And again, Miko came over the Zello and said, "Papa kom in, Papa kom in." And my wife took the phone and she said, "Is everybody alive at home?" "Yes, oor," he said. And then my wife said, "Leave us alone." And then we switched off the phone. So sometimes they encroach on your time, but they are a blessing. So I want to just recount the story where there were 2 kids. I watched them play. The one day was an Afrikaans kid and an English kid. So they were on the seesaw, on a wipplank. And the Afrikaans boy, what he did was where the seesaw touches the ground, they built in these rubber like tires so that you have a bit of a whip on it, right? So what the Afrikaans boy would do is, as he hit the bottom, he would smack it down so that the English boy could be lifted up into the air and shriek with laughter. But when the English boy came down, somehow he broke the fall with his legs. So he just braked a bit, and then the Afrikaans boy just got very agitated because he also wanted to fly, right? And then at some point I thought, okay, so how's the Afrikaans boy? So I know the boy, his English is like terrible. So I wondered how he was going to now talk to the English boy that couldn't speak Afrikaans and tell him just to do something differently. After about 2 minutes of going up and down, the Afrikaans boy yelled at the English boy. And he told him the following. He said, "Trick up your beans." Trek op your bene, pull up your legs. And promptly, as the English boy came down, he tricked up his beans. So somehow they were able to understand each other. So they make things work, kids, eh? Afrikaans, English, doesn't matter. So that's just a light-hearted story about seesaws, because what I experience in my house, in my life, in my family, in our businesses that we run, I experience a bit of a hope seesaw. Then, it's Cricket World Cup, and then, it's Cricket World Cup, Then, the rand is at 14, and then the rand is at 14.80. It's this hope seesaw that we live in. And I had the privilege a few months ago to listen to a talk of Thuli Madonsela, an amazing woman. She was the public protector. She was like in the middle of the storm when things broke around the previous presidency and so on. And she read a quote that we all know. I mean, maybe you haven't read the book Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, but she read a quote right at the beginning in chapter 1, and she focused in on something that really, really struck me, and it spoke to me about this hope seesaw that we are in so many times. And particularly, she made it relevant, not on a hope seesaw, but she made this relevant to South Africans, very particularly. So that's this quote that says the following: it was the best of times, and then it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, unbelief. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Now, I had read this many times and I've heard it many times, but something that I had never read before was what she then focused on, and that was, but we had everything before us. And then she started speaking about moments in her career and in her role as the public protector, where she went home and she was like in despair, and then she knew she had to come back to work and she had to fight for what was right. And then realizing that actually for every leader, whether you are a leader in your family, whether you are a leader in business, whether you are a leader in your community, if you look around you, you will hear the music. You will see what is available around you to result the change and to bring hope back into your community. We had everything before us. Now, this book is written, as we know, and the context of it is the French Revolution, 1789. And the way that Charles Dickens writes this book is he's very empathetic to the overthrow of the aristocracy in France, but then he's very, very scathing of the resultant empire that gets built and the way that people are just smashed even afterwards. It's a tale of two cities, it's a tale of London, it's a tale of Paris. But right through the book, now when I read the book again, right through the book, you pick up these snippets of leadership that was available, resources that were available, things that were available that could have helped a nation to not go into a 100-year slump of economic despair. If they just realized that they had things available to restore the hope. It's quite a powerful statement if you think about this hope seesaw and the type of things that we require to actually change the world that we live in. Because when we look at the economy, so as you build AFGRI into this country and also onto the continent, you realize that South Africa is in a very difficult place. Extremely difficult. In the last quarter, the GDP, the extent to which the economy was able to grow or contract, was the worst GDP quarter-on-quarter number that we have seen in 10 years. So our economy contracted by 3.2%. Now, if you are in a services organization, if you are in a financing organization, I know that recently you guys purchased a banking license, so you're going into that world, onto the continent as well. If you are in that context, and you think about how the economy shrunk, one of the biggest leaders in the shrinking quarter-on-quarter was the agricultural sector. And then you think about, okay, so if there's a contraction, are there state-owned enterprises that can assist us to get out of it? Then we look at just the debt that our state-owned enterprises are in. Now in 2010, the debt of our state-owned enterprises totaled about 266 billion rand. So that was 2010. Fast forward 2017, the debt of our state-owned enterprises totaled 702 billion rand. Now, if you fast forward to 2020, it's probably going to breach 1 trillion rand of debt. So just our ability as a country to service the debt is very, very constrained. So that's the state of the state. If you now ask the question, what is the state of the citizenship? The state of the citizenship is, what is the unemployment rate currently in South Africa? Who knows? Or is it something that you block from your mind? So 27.6%. Okay, it is 27.6% is a terrible number. So that's unemployment. If you then ask the question, how many people in this country, so we're 57 million people in this country, how many people do you think have debt? So you have to be over 18 to have debt. So what do you think is the amount of people in South Africa of the 57 million that have debt? Any idea? 24 million people of the 57 million have debt. Now, if you take an unemployment rate of 27.6 and you say 24 million people have debt, it means that 8 million people have debt that don't even have jobs. Okay, so that doesn't work so like it. So that is when we buy shoes or we buy clothes or we buy whatever we buy on debt, but I don't have a job. And then 40% of the people that have debt have a bad debt record. 40%. Now think about what you are going to go into the foray of banking, and that's the context in which we come in. That is the state of our citizenship. So if we look at the hope seesaw, then you say, okay, but I feel that good things are happening in this country because there's a president that's coming in, there's a new cabinet that was brought in, there's like the state-owned enterprises, there's a cleanup of a lot of the directorships, and there's a lot of good things happening, and then you look at these numbers, and then you are in this hope seesaw. And then we wonder how we can get out of it. And the brutal thing is, it gets onto the psyche of our kids as well. So we have to deal with it, but our kids are faced with us at this moment in time. So Andreas, the oldest one, he's in second year now. So when he was a matric, so the one day, so he was just tired of matric. So they get to that place where they need to get out of it. And I remember I dropped him off in winter. He had a hockey practice early in the morning. It was still dark. And I felt that I had to just, be a good father and say something nice to him, because he was feeling very sorry for himself. And I said, son, it's quite dark outside still, are you going to be all right? He said, dark? Dark is like my future, and he's like, and I said, listen, don't be a drama queen, okay, so let's just go out and play hockey, put on a tracksuit, get over yourself. So this is now like this hope seesaw. So he didn't know what he was going to study. He didn't know whether he was going to get a job. And now he's in the building industry and he's studying quantity surveying. And this very same boy in matric, he was in a difficult situation. And how do you, in this country, how do you give hope to this boy? Now, it's 2 years later, and this boy now has a girlfriend for the first time in his life. Now there's a lot of hope in his life. The way that he broke the news to us, so we didn't know. We knew there was a girl, but we didn't know that he would have a girlfriend. And we got home the one day, and They had gone out the previous evening, and he said, I think we sort of together, him and this girl now. And I said, what does that mean? What does sort of together mean? So Blada leaned forward and she said, did you kiss her? And he said, yes. And then my daughter of 14 started just open applause. She was just so happy that her brother now had a girlfriend. So now he's got hope. So he's in this hope seesaw. You know, he's worried about his future, but now he's got somebody to share his worries with, you know, in the girlfriend. And all of us are in this hope seesaw. Our kids are, we are, our country is. I had a meeting the other day with Minister Praveen Gordhan on a thing. And in a moment of, he was, you know, tired, and at that morning there was another public protector thing that came after him and so on. And in a moment, not of weakness, but I think just of tiredness, with a lot of people that sat around the room, he just shared his hope seesaw. And he said, we were able to do all of these things in the SOCs, but these are all the things that I still have to do. And he paused for about 20 seconds, he gathered himself, and then he was able to speak again. This guy is 72 years old. 72. And he is faced with this behemoth of SOC debt that he needs to help sort out. So, this hope seesaw is something, does it resonate? Does it feel like it's something that we are talking about? Hello? Okay, so in the hope seesaw, I want us to maybe just consider together how hope can be restored. If it's true that we say we had everything before us, it means that if we look around us, if we look at people around us, if we look at things around us, that there is a possibility, a probability that we can restore the hope. It is not hopeless. We are in a hope seesaw. And I want for us, if it's possible, just to think together about how does one restore hope in your business, in your family, in your community, in the universities that your kids go to, in the schools that your kids go to. How does one restore hope? And the way that I thought that we could do it is if we just think about the hope of Africa. So I believe that there is just so much resource available to restore hope. Now, if you study economics, you know that population growth, people, productivity, is one of the biggest drivers of economic growth. There's many things, there's capital and there's like services, but population, people, population growth, people that can productively work, that is one of the biggest drivers of economic growth, of restoring hope into a community or country or continent. So if we just look at the current, or in 2010, the 20 most populous megacities in the world. So those are the cities where the most people congregate into one place. This looks very familiar, right? So New York, big. So Moscow, 12.5 million people in Moscow. 12.5 million angry Russians in Moscow. Then New York is about 8 million people. London is about 8 million people. New York, if I remember correctly, about 6 million people. It's like big, big cities. And you can understand the economic growth that is happening in those cities. And then you see that there's a lot of people, as we know, in China and in India. But the point of where the world is moving towards in young population, so in Japan, for example, there are 60,000 centennials. 60,000 centennials. In other words, those are 60,000 people that are older than 100 in Japan. But the average Kenyan's age is 17. The average person in Kenya, their age is 17. Good. So now, if you fast forward that to 2025, this is where the 20 most populous cities in the world will move towards. 2025, 2050, 2075, and the year 2100. Okay, why? Because there is an aging population in the developed markets, in the US particularly, in Europe particularly, and in Japan. There is a younger population growing in Africa, India, and China. If you put that together in urbanization, the rate of people urbanizing, coming from the rural areas into urban areas, the likelihood of productivity gains, if you want to figure out where your kids and their kids should be working, where the action is going to be by the year in the next 18 years, the action is going to be here. If you want to figure out where your kids should be working, what should they be focusing on, where should they study and where should they go, in my opinion, you go where the productivity gains will be, where the economic growth will be. And this is a stat that shows us that on the continent of Africa and in India and in China, those are the places where the action will be and the productivity growth will be and the hope will come from. This is just one measure. The hope of the world. The hope of the world, not of Africa, the hope of the world, when my kids grow up and their kids grow up, is where the action is going to be. And all of us are trying to run away and go to Middle Earth. Where's Middle Earth? New Zealand. This is where they shot the movies, Lord of the Rings. They shot it in New Zealand, Middle Earth. People want to run there, but the action is going to be here. And the parents run away. Why? The parents run away for their future of their kids. But the action in the time where their kids will grow up will be here. The hope seesaw. So I believe, statistically speaking, economic theory speaking, economic reality speaking, that there is hope for Africa. One of the measures is not only the mineral resources, but it's also productivity gains and population growth and youth. You know, in Japan, they are really struggling to keep people working. People are aging, they don't have young people coming into their economy, so what are they building? They're currently building exoskeletons. So it is these machines that they clamp onto people's arms and backs so that they can do manual labor. So it is like a robot that they clamp on all people. So that when you push the button, I need it sometimes, you bend down, you push the button and you go up again. I mean, that's the reality of the world that they live in. If you look at the UK, the extent to which the previous generation, the baby boomers, Generation X's and the silent generation, took money out of that economy, the debt of that economy. In 2 generations, they will not be able to repay the debt. And now, the amounts of people that are in retirement they've become more than the people that are actually working. Now, if you know how a pension system works, the young people work and help the older people in order for them to be able to retire. Now, if there are more people in retirement than that are working, you are creating a deficit that you will never get out of. That is the state of the developed markets. But we want to go to the UK. And that is the extent to which, so kids in the UK, like kids my kids' age, the Generation Z's and the Generation Y's, they cannot afford to live in London. It is too expensive. They have to borrow money from mom and pop to just put a deposit down on their house. If you had to list the bank of mom and pop, as they call it, if you have to aggregate all the money that parents have to pay of their savings in order to just get their kids housing, if you had to list the bank of mom and pop in the UK today, it will be the 8th largest mortgage bank in the UK. You see, there's so we run a business in the UK and the Channel Islands. The hope seesaw that they are sitting in. The young generation, they're saying, okay, but my parents took everything out of this country. Now they voted for Brexit. Now I won't be able to work in Europe. I mean, it's a disaster. The people that voted for Brexit are not the people that have to make the money and make a living 20 years from now. And now there's this social unrest, and now, heaven forbid, Boris Johnson could become, the guy in the UK. Imagine Boris and Trump and Putin together. Talk about a hope seesaw. But we want to go to different places. We want to go to Middle Earth. We want to go to the bank of mom and pop. There's a hope seesaw throughout the world. If you want to figure out where to put your energy, a solution could be the place where your kids will find their action and where they will be able to find a living. So this is no reflection of the company that I work for. This is just me thinking about my kids, thinking about our house, about our future, switching off the business day and all of these things that make money on bad news, and just thinking a few steps forward about how does one restore hope. That makes sense? Okay. So now I've spoken a lot. So I want to suggest that we, just amongst ourselves, 2 or 3, see if we can answer these following questions. Just 2. If there is a possibility of restoring hope, and let's assume for the moment that my soliloquy and this very fancy slides that I put up about where productivity gains is going to come from. Let's assume for the moment that there's a possibility of hope being restored. If there's even a grain of truth of that possibility, of hope being restored just in South Africa, probably the 2 questions that we need to answer today is the following. 1, who could restore hope? Who's the person? Who's the person with power for the hour to bring hope? Who should we be hanging our hats on? So luckily this is now after the election, so we can't make this an election story. Just who? Who can restore hope? First question. And then the second question is, what could restore hope? A who and a what? Can we do that? Can we maybe just 2 together? And if you're sitting alone, speak to yourself, or maybe just turn around. But just for a few minutes, answer those 2 questions, and maybe what we can do. And then afterwards, what we're going to do is we're going to just ask people to dim the lights. To give their answers back to us. Okay. Just 2 or 3 minutes. So have we been able to solve world peace? Not yet. So who believes that you've got, doesn't have to be like the answer, okay? There aren't the answers, but just a view, a grain of truth on that first question. Who can restore hope? Whose job is it? And we're going to just bring mics around so that when they make the recording, that people can hear your questions or your answers that you've postulated. Is that all right? You don't have to have the camera on you, so there's no stage fright that you can have, but we just want to hear your questions. Anybody that wants to offer an answer to who could restore hope in South Africa today? So there's one person at the back, and then one to the front. On who, yeah?
I think who for us is not necessarily one person or a politician. We always tend to look outside of ourselves and at other people. I think it's up to ordinary South Africans to restore hope for our country.
Great. Okay, so the one answer there is it can't be in one person, it can't be only politicians. It has to be broader than that. Cool, thank you. And just as a person over here.
I'll start with who shouldn't restore hope.
Okay, let's not go there.
My answer is similar to what he said, but I'm more focused on I think the private sector is the one that should restore hope in South Africa. And they shouldn't be looking at anybody. They should, in fact, come together. And maybe I should say we should, in fact, be coming together because we are part of the private sector and saying, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to generate in terms of work, primarily aimed at youth. Because if we don't, we're going to get to the same point that Japan is at.
Youth unemployment in South Africa has now crossed 50%. So you're making a very crucial point of private sector coming together, not only for itself, but also for the next generation. It's a very powerful statement. Thank you very much. There's a point here. She's going to come after you after that mic. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with Puti and Herman regarding who is going to create hope. But for me personally, I think that our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, he's in a position where he can uplift people and he can create hope in the people of South Africa, because I'm comparing him to the previous president, and we were extremely disappointed and angry. And now that for the benefit of the doubt, I think he's got a lot more integrity, and I think a lot of people are looking up to him to make changes in the country that's going to be satisfactory.
So, I mean, it's a very important point that you make, and the point is there is a role for government, and there is a role for a president of a country to walk a specific walk. So I think what you're adding to it is not only private sector, it is probably a combination of. Great, okay. It's a powerful point about being hope for people beyond your own community, for people beyond your own world. I think it's a very, very powerful statement. Anything that people want to add before we go on to what could restore hope? So we've spoken about people now, and I think the consensus is it's more than just one person. Yeah? It has to be more than just one person. You know, in previous iterations of this across the globe, there was a person, and it was usually a man, that was the power for the hour. Because what you actually would want is you want somebody that is the head of state and the head of government. And if you go years back, then head of state, head of government, and head of whatever religion that country sought after. But unfortunately for us today, there are only 5 monarchies left in the world. 5 monarchies left in the world. For 200,000 e-bucks, who knows which 5 are those? Do you know?
Netherlands, UK.
No, they've got kings, but they're not head of state and head of government. Okay. Queen Elizabeth II is a very rich lady, but she doesn't run the government. She's got somebody like Boris Johnson now to contend with. Swaziland is one, yes. Swaziland is one. Another one? Lesotho, no, they've got a government. So there's Brunei is one. Brunei is close to Thailand. Then Saudi Arabia is another one. Oman is another one. And then Vatican City, that small little state. Only 5 left. So only in 5 of those places can you say there is one person. So it has to be probably more than that. It has to be more than that, because there is no person with ultimate power, even though they might think so. Okay, so there are people that think they've got all the power in the world and they can have trade wars and they can have all of these things, but they don't. And maybe then to the question of what could restore hope in South Africa. Probably a more difficult question. What could restore hope? Not who, but what? Okay, anybody that wants to give an answer to that one? So access to opportunities to be economically active. So we talk about youth unemployment, and the reality is that there's youth that have degrees that are unemployed. I had this bizarre moment where I met a guy in Pretoria. Government gave him a bursary to study. So NSFAS gave him a bursary to study, and when we happened upon him, this guy, he had a smell to him, and they couldn't figure out so why, and he didn't look like he had enough food and so on. But he's at university as a Takis, university studying law and so on and so forth. And then we realized that this kid lives on the streets, comes from Limpopo, got a degree, got a bursary to come and study. He's studying, he's got his books. His biggest angst is to protect his books in the park where he sleeps. Because that's the reality that kids live in. President Ramaphosa started this project called YES, Youth Employment Scheme. And in our company, there's I can't remember now, I think it was 7,000 kids that we brought into it. We called it, in First Rand, we called it the First Jobs Program, so people that have degrees, but they don't have jobs. And we said to the people that work with us, don't you want to nominate? Don't you want to nominate somebody to come onto the First Jobs Program? And there was like 7,000 kids that came, and we put them through for a year. So we offered them a work opportunity for a year. We put them through a program at Gibbs, a business school that helps them with entrepreneurship and a lot of different things. And I had the opportunity at Gibbs to speak to all of them. Spoke about saving and financial literacy and so on and so forth. And I spent a lot of time there because I started just listening to their stories, the hope that they have, and how just this opportunity of a year of working. So we can't give all of them jobs. We've given them a year of work opportunity, and now what we're trying to do is we're trying to then say, this is how we've tooled them. These are like people with maths degrees, science degrees, accounting degrees, and now we're trying to get a project to put them into some of our clients' businesses, saying we've spent the money in order to tool them not only with degrees but for the workplace. Don't you want to consider them for employment? Those are the opportunities that you are talking about, where people, it's something that the government started, great idea, the YES program, but then how companies embraced it and are trying to bring and restore that hope. I think it's a very, very, very necessary thing for South Africa. Somebody that wants to add to that? There's somebody at the back here. If you can just, you've got a mic, sorry.
So I guess my point then sort of goes a step before that, because currently we work with, we offer, what do you call this, tuitions, tutorings on weekends with a local school. So for me, I think one thing that, even though you still find a case now where even people who are educated struggle to maybe find employment or to be able to start their own businesses because of the opportunities that are not there, on average, the most of the people in my circle, or even my own experience, I probably would not be where I am if it were not for the fact that I am educated. And I think in our country, unfortunately, there's still too many people who aren't educated. But I think education currently is still too fixated on you work, then you go find a company to work for, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I think there needs to be more exposure linked to education, whereby kids not only are being given proper education, but are also being shown that these are the opportunities that are available for you, not for anyone else. Because I think most of our kids don't have that exposure around them when they grow up, so they don't know that it's possible. So the exposure with the education, I think, is something that could add to restore hope, to say, you know what, if I do work hard, these are the opportunities that I can do. But you won't get that if you actually don't, if you don't know anything and you're not exposed.
You're touching on something that we talk about, you can just call it transcendent leadership. So you transcend your world into the world of somebody else and say, listen, I will probably not be able in my lifetime to work on these opportunities, but let me help you work with those opportunities. So just in my little world, who's lost like a loved one through crime in this country? Okay, so there's, in any room that I speak in, people have lost loved ones. So I've lost loved ones through crime in this country. So there's many ways that you can then try to deal with it. And the way that I chose to deal with it was, I believe that crime in this country is not necessarily a poverty issue, it's not an unemployment issue, it's more a fatherlessness issue. That people don't have those mentors, those people that walk a journey with them. They study or they go to school, but not all of us have fathers that can father us and enroll just in families and psychology. You know that fathers play a big role in identity. Mothers play a big role in relationship. It's not just clear cut, but just in psychology. That's sort of the pattern that you see. And transcending my world in the father that I am to our 3 kids, I then said, okay, but if fatherlessness is the issue in our country, one of the biggest issues in the country, for every person that I lost because of crime in this country, I will mentor 5. I will coach 5 kids, 5 young people that don't have fathers. And then I spend time with them to do that, to challenge them and say, okay, but don't play the victim. You know, this is the opportunity that you've got, and when you see they want to embrace an opportunity, then help them through the opportunity. Maybe sometimes finance the opportunity. So it's a different way of, I mean, when the first person that I lost, just somebody very dear to me through crime, I mean, I was so angry, and I was in this hope seesaw, and I just decided I'm going to do something different, because otherwise I'm just going to be this angry old person. And it's such a privilege to see these young kids where they go from these angry, you know, I'm the victim and woe is me, to these people that walk up straight and that capture opportunities and make a success of their lives, small and big ones. Such a powerful statement that you're making, transcending your world, transcending just my kids, just transcending just my community, and looking out for those people that have the leadership or the guts to do something with their lives. So just on the point of who, I want to agree with you, and I want to show to you a bit of a model that Dennis Prager, he's a political commentator in the US. He runs a talk show, American talk show like talk radio. And this is not his model, but it's sort of built on what he talks about. Whose responsibility is it? So who didn't like maths at school? Yeah, so sorry. Yeah. The y-axis on the left-hand side is the axis that talks about personal responsibility, and then the x-axis talks about government responsibility. The further you go on the axis, it means increased responsibility. And then he speaks about something that he calls the responsibility or the impact curve. So if you then ask the question, if you want to give all the responsibility, there's only 5 monarchies in the world left, if you want to give all the responsibility to government, what you are then asking for is for a structure of socialism. And then you must go and live maybe in North Korea and get one of these very fancy undercut hairstyles. Because there's the place where there's one person that takes all your freedom away. If you look at what happens in the y-axis, if you want to give all responsibility to government, then you are asking for a system of socialism. Then probably the one that is overtly socialist left in the world is North Korea. And then what it means is that your freedom, yes, your responsibility, but your freedoms and all of that you will abdicate and give away. If we came back and we said it is only government's responsibility, the only political system in the world that give all responsibility to government, currently there's no monarchies left, so it's socialism. And if it's socialism, it means that yes, your responsibility reduced, but so does your freedom. So me, I don't want that. I like my hairstyle. My wife likes it too. If you don't like it, Then let's talk about rich democracies. In a rich democracy, there is less responsibility on government, or more responsibility, but also more on people, but their governments have money. Where we are a poor democracy. We have been a poor democracy for a very long period of time. And if you say government must sort it out, and government doesn't have the finances to sort it out, even when we had economic growth of 4.5%, 8-9 years ago, that money was not enough to restore hope in this country, to restore unemployment. There isn't enough money. So what it means, what Dennis Prager he makes a very simple point. He says, when you live in a poor democracy, government's responsibility because of their finances, not because of their will or their wants or corruption or anything, just because they don't have the money. The majority of the money and the employment capability sits in the private sector. And personal responsibility, your and my responsibility, our company, your company, all the companies and whatever associations you got, that's where the responsibility has to reside. But if we say it is President Ramaphosa's problem, or it is Minister Pravin Gordhan's problem, or Minister Tito Mbowene's problem, if that is the mindset, then you must understand that that mindset will not restore hope in South Africa. Because government does not have the finances. Doesn't have the finances. Even if we get all the money back that was stolen, it will not be enough to restore hope in this country, which means that you and I, AFGRI, and the companies that I work with and work for, we have to take up responsibility. Have to take up responsibility. I mean, it's bizarre, right? So if you take your iPhone, okay, so Apple, if you read at the back, it says designed in California, assembled in China. How on earth do you start a trade war? The biggest manufacturers of Harley-Davidson motorcycles, where? China. Okay. She's got a Huawei, clearly. Okay, I want to, for those of you that hate maths, so I apologize for those of you that love maths, this is probably something that resonates with you. If you are more right brain orientated and you like pictures, I just want to share with you this picture in a way that when I speak to businesses, when I speak to young people, wherever I have the opportunity to talk about whose responsibility is it anyway. This is a picture that I just want to share with you. Can you see that? So this is just a representation of, this is a room with many different lights, different colors, different shapes, different, whatever, brightness and so on. And then these lights being linked into a pylon, if you can see it on the left there, and then that linkage into the pylon, then linking into all of those dark places in the world, shedding light in Africa. So if you have a left brain and this doesn't work for you, relax. If you have a right brain and this works for you, I'm very glad for it. It is just a picture, a representation of what if. What if each and every one of us that has been perfectly positioned, perfectly connected, perfectly assembled. What if each and every one of us, if it's not only President Ramaphosa's problem, if it's all of our problems, what if we can realize, and when we speak to our kids about what they're going to study, look at what they are gifted with and what they are great and what are the opportunities in the market and in the world. Just think about how you have been perfectly positioned, perfectly connected, if you can just be switched on for more than just your own little world. And you can connect into a company like AFGRI. You can connect into whatever your church, synagogue, mosque, wherever you are linked into a community. You can link into something like-minded people, connected people, people that have the same passions of tutorship or learning or financing, whatever rocks your boat. If you can be switched on for more than just yourself, and you get linked into like-minded people, It's then when we can bring light to a very dark place. But as long as we live these lives, these insular lives, that hope seesaw will not rebalance. So if you ask me the question, who? It is each and every one of us. But there's something in our minds that need to switch. There's something that needs to switch. And I want to put a question up. We're not going to discuss the question yet. But it's this type of thinking that I believe will be an activation of how we think about restoring hope in South Africa. So where can hope be restored? Whether it's your company, whether it's Africa, whether it's in your community, whether it's in your family. If you think about where you feel hopeless, even in your family, if it's a relationship with your child, or with your spouse, or with your parents, or with siblings, or where is there a hopelessness even, not a hope seesaw, but maybe there's a hopelessness that has come into your world, or into your community, or into AFGRI as a whole. Even there, if you work in a subdivision or place where you feel that there's something that needs to change here. And many times we stop at that top portion. We identify the problem. We identify the hopelessness. We identify the gap. And then we look for the person of power for the hour to come and sort it out. We very seldom get challenged to go to that next step. Given my position, given my capabilities, given my connections, what could a different future look like? We get stuck at that top portion. We're very good. It's so easy to criticize. It's so easy to identify the problem. But to be able to lead into a different future reality. That video that we saw about what Chris said. Just the art of making the impossible possible. Not through magic, but through understanding my position. I've been given this opportunity. I've been given this job. I'm in this team. I'm in this place and community. I've got relationship with these people in my family. I've been given a position. I've learned certain things. I've got a capability. I studied certain things. I had exposure to certain people. I've learned certain things. I've got a capability. And now, just thinking about your relationship with people, how am I connected to people outside of this world that I can come and fix and restore and make the impossible possible? That's the challenge, I think, for us in that second portion. So we had to think about that in our company when we spoke about just the world that we live in. So for us, as a management team, we looked at where can hope be restored, and we said in the savings industry in South Africa, hope must be restored. Must be restored. And we had the opportunity to start a business from scratch, and we said, okay, so how are we going to, given our position, given our capability, given our connections, how are we going to do something about the savings industry and the state of the savings industry in South Africa and on the continent of Africa? So this is what we said. The state of the industry is the following. So that blue line is the net income of South African households. It's an increasing blue line. There are a lot more South Africans now that have been brought into the middle class than 10 years ago. So incomes have increased. But look at what happened to the savings line. That's the darker line. The net savings of households, it's now below zero. Households don't save. They spend. One day only. Must have it. There's no way that I can't go without this thing that I didn't know that I needed, that I didn't know that I had, that I didn't know was sold, and so on. Now one day only comes and now I need to have it. And now there's a negative savings rate. So what we said in our business is, because we exist, we are going to help people to save. Which means that I need to get quality product at an affordable price through an advice engine that I can deliver to people through a cell phone. because there are people that will never get access to financial advice and those type of things. So we built investment products, we built a robo-advisor, and we put those two things on the internet and on apps and on cell phones to sell. Okay, so that is just an example of looking at the problem. It's easy to identify the problem. Net savings rate of 0. Okay, so whose problem is it? It's my problem. I have the opportunity to do something about it, even though it's in a small way. But then we're going to spend our time in creating such products. Next one. This is the extent to which the pension system in South Africa is broken. So this is a net replacement ratio. So a net replacement ratio this is people that are saving, right? So those are people that aren't saving. This is people that are saving. Now, a measure of how strong a pension system is in a country is you measure it by the net replacement ratio. In other words, what is the percentage of your last salary check that you will have available in retirement? So you worked for 30 years, you worked for 40 years, you built up a pension, and now that pension you're now going to use while you're on retirement. And you want that net replacement ratio to be something like 74%. You know, it doesn't have to be 100% of what you used to earn. You're going to shave less because you don't have to go to work. You're going to not have to buy suits. So it's 74% is sort of the measure. The net replacement ratio in South Africa is 12%. The net replacement ratio, average net replacement ratio in South Africa, of people that have work, 74% of South Africans that have work will not be able to retire in the same living standard as they lived during work. 74%. Which means be nice to your kids because you're going to live with them. And if you don't have them, get them. No, I'm joking. Don't. If you don't want them, don't have them. That's the reality. So then what we said was, this is the issue. And we said what we are going to do is we are going to bring different solutions, different products, different types of things into the pension system. And because we exist, the net replacement ratio will be better. And we're doing that in a massive, massive way in the South African pension system as we speak. Then the last one is that there's a $1 billion funding deficit. $1 billion deficit. In other words, there's funding, but we lack $1 billion every year to build infrastructure on the continent of Africa. So we said, we are going to help fund Africa. We are going to get funding out of the US, out of Singapore, out of Southeast Asia, out of Europe, and we are going to bring that into building malls in Lagos. We are going to bring that into building office parks in Accra. We are going to spend time getting those pension funds in the developed world that are underfunded because they've got an aging population. They need growth. Guess what? I say, come, we've got growth in Africa. Let me take you into Africa for funding. And that's where we spend a lot of time. Does that make sense? Yeah. So asking the question, so where can hope be restored? Where's their hopelessness? Savings industry, that's where we work. And then what can we do about it? Different example. So in our community, so my wife, she lost her first husband in a car accident when our oldest one was, Andreas was 2.5 when his natural father passed away. So Blade and I got married when he was 5.5. I liked him so much I had to marry his mother. I mean, it was like a deal from heaven. So she went through a difficult time as a single parent and so on. I made some mistakes in my life before. I went through a divorce after 10 years of marriage. Got married very early on and so on and so forth. So I know what it feels like to go through a divorce. And then we decided together, there's something that we had to learn as a family coming together about marriage and about things, what to do and what not to do. And then we decided, that is, marriages are hurting in this country. I've hurt, my wife has hurt. What if we can take some of our resources and we can team up with people and we can help marriages? And we took a portion of our what we have and we said, we're going to team up with people, and currently 100 people every month go through the marriage counseling camps that we've put together. 100 people every month. Because that's the possible. So whose job is it? Whose job is it? I've heard. But whose job is it to do something about it? And we took things that probably my kids in their inheritance would have gotten. We've allocated it somewhere else. And we said, but now we're going to help people. If we take FirstRand, the bigger company, our holding company, it's amazing how, there's a lot of excuses that one can make, right? So FirstRand could have said, so we employ 45,000 people in South Africa. So we could have said, okay, but we employ a lot of people, so it's fine. We're doing our bit. 45 people, there's a lot of people. Just think about the HR issues of 45,000 people. And then we said, okay, so 45,000 people we employ, and then we're probably one of the, if not the biggest taxpayer in this country. So there's a lot of money that we give to the fiscus. Now the fiscus just needs to use it. And then there's probably 350 million rand that through corporate social investment every year we plow into the country. Sizwe Nkasana, our previous CEO, he pushed the program very hard into education in this country. And then as a management team, we looked at it and we said, okay, so are those excuses, or is South Africa still broken despite of that? And then we realized, there's, what if the impossible? What if we've got a balance sheet of 1.53 trillion rand is our balance sheet, lending that we do, 1.53. What if we use our entire balance sheet, 1.53 trillion rand, and lend it in ways that would help restore hope? I can make excuses, 45,000 people, tax-paying, CSI money, but what is the thing that we've been gifted? A balance sheet of 1.5 trillion. Okay, so what if, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not easy, and you have to redirect things, and you have to do things differently, but what if we can take 1.53 trillion rand and say we will only lend in ways that will build the country as opposed to just build shareholder value? It's a tricky thing. So those are the examples of whose job is it? And the types of question that we have to ask ourselves. It's a challenging thing, it's a challenging thing to not only moan, but use moaning as a platform of identifying hopelessness or where hope can be restored, and then activating your position, your capabilities, and your connections to do something about it, even though it might be in the smallest microcosm of ways. If each and every one of those lights get activated, just imagine the light that will be brought into dark places of marriages, of business, of kids. My wife and I spend a lot of time with youth in this country. With youth youth depression and youth suicides, and the incidents of self-mutilation that we see. It is just the hopelessness. It is absolutely astounding. But what if just our connection, just our passion, just our hearts can help one child that's cutting themselves? Just one. And they've got a different future, a different trajectory. But now, it's the social worker's job, or it's their parents, they should have sorted this out. Now, it's their problem. Just one. Transcending your world into something that is just beyond you. We're not going to discuss this, but can I just maybe suggest, if there is even the smallest grain of truth that resonates in your hearts at the moment, let us not stop at that top end of the question. Let us push through into the bottom section of those questions. And if you are activated in a different way today, just in a passion that you've got for whatever you've got a passion for, maybe that passion inside of you is something that you should do something about. And our ability to identify problems could then be equaled by our ability to solve those problems. And then if we step into this next question of what can restore hope, in my opinion, the only thing that can restore hope is this thing called generosity. It's the only thing. But you see, even then, there's a massive culture shift that needs to happen around how we hoard our resources. Because, it's scarce, and I need to hold on to it. It's scarce, and I need to hold on to it for dear life. So in my opinion, if you ask me the question about how, generosity is the how. So our oldest one, Andreas, when I chat to him, it gets reflected back at me, just how we think. I had this bizarre conversation with him at the beginning of this year, so long story of how we are trying to teach him about finances, and how when he was 16, we gave him an allowance and he had to buy clothes and everything, and had to buy everything for himself. We would give him food and we would give him housing. Sometimes when he was naughty, I said to my wife, he's going to pay rent here because I don't, he's a difficult one. But this one day, he had to get a new blazer. So he grew quite fast and he needed to get a new school blazer. And he said, Dad, I need a school blazer. I said, shop, save for it and get it. And the next day he came home and he bought a second-hand school blazer at the school, from the school shop. And I said, no. He said, Dad, you know what the new things cost? I mean, it's like horrible. I said, no, I don't know. Tell me about it. And he learned something about how to work with his money. So this very same child, from 16, we've been working with him in that way. We've made mistakes, he made mistakes, and together we learn. And now beginning of this year, he said to me, Dad, what we didn't work out there's this great tool called Excel. It's like a great tool that you can teach your kids with. So we built this Excel thing with him, and so how you're going to spend your money. And he said, the thing that we didn't think about was books. Textbooks, and how I'm going to buy textbooks. And I said to him, it's a strange thing that you talk about textbooks, because just a month ago you spoke about how you were selling your first year textbooks and the money that you were making. So I thought you were going to use that money to now buy the second year textbook. And he said, no, Dad, but this is my money. I said, what do you mean this is your money? I said, it's my money that funded the textbook in the first place, and now you're selling the textbook, and shouldn't you now take the textbook and buy the new textbook and just give me my money back? They said, no, it's mine. I said, when did it become yours? I gave you that money. Now the very same source you want to come after and now get, money again. We had an interesting discussion. And then afterwards I thought about what we do many times. So we earn money out of opportunities, the point that you made earlier, opportunities that we've been given in this country. So we take resources out of the country into my pocket, and then when we are asked, how are you going to use those resources to bring hope back into this country, you say, it's mine. Where did the money come from? It came from opportunities generated in South Africa, and now when you are asked to think about how I'm going to open my hands generously to restore hope, not stupidly, generously, I said, no, it's mine. Then I have a go at my teenage son, but I do the same thing. Simple example of how we live with absolutely closed hands. And the thing that I think we should be doing is we need to recognize the culture, because this is how just my heart. So this is again no reflection of the company that I work for and so on. This is just my reflection of generosity. We've got sources of needs. My needs, then the needs of others. And when I say my needs, the needs of my family and my wife, and then needs of others, and then the biggest needs in society. So those could be sources of need. Then you've got resource allocation. And when it comes to my kids, their education, their health, their whatevers, guess what? I will give everything that I've got to them. When it comes to other people's needs, what is left, I'll allocate to them. And usually I do that out of guilt. Okay? Something went wrong, now I feel guilty, and so on and so. And then probably the worst, and what we're actually talking about today, is those biggest needs in society, that hopelessness, that hope seesaw that we all live in. There's no allocation. Why? Because it's just hopeless. I'm not even going to try. The divorce rate in South Africa is so high, I'm not even going to try. The savings industry in this country is so broken, I'm not even going to try. It is just so big. The fatherlessness in this country is just so big, I'm not even going to try. But what if each and every one of us in our sphere of influence, in our place of connection, in our place of capability, in our place of positioning can be activated in a different way? Again, if this resonates, just 2%. Actually, this is how I think about my resources. Just think about where that money came from in the first place. And judiciously, then just turning and opening hands in a smart way. I'm not saying in a stupid way and throw money after people that use it and abuse it. That's not what I'm talking about. So I want to then maybe just switch gears for a moment on this picture. And I want to just challenge us in this way. So many times we say I don't have to give. I don't have to give. And maybe you're sitting here today and you don't have to give because you've got debt problems. Many times when I speak with people about generosity, they said, okay, I don't have to give. And then when you think about, okay, why don't you have to give? It's because I've got all of this debt to pay. I've got this car and I've got this house and I've got all of these things. And then when I speak to business people, like with sole proprietors and so on and so forth, their personal debt has become so interlinked with their company debt that there's just no way out. And then they say, okay, but how can I be generous if I have nothing? And then this person earns tens of thousands of rands per month. And then they say they've got nothing. But there's a culture reset that, in my opinion, we have to go through. And this I'll probably get fired for in the company that I work for, seeing that I work in a banking group. But you can live without debt. It's not heresy. I studied economics for a very long period of time. I know all the things about, time value of money and. Okay, you can live without debt. And what if the 24 million people in South Africa that have debt can live debt-free? I chatted to this one guy the other day. So he drove a very nice bakkie. It wasn't Amarok, so it wasn't that nice, but it was it's an alright bakkie. Then he drove it for 2 years. Then one day I saw it's like a new bakkie. And I said to him, hey, Chom, okay, so how did that happen? He said, no, he's got the biggest deal ever. I said, what deal is that? He said, for the very same payment, installment that I make every month, I could get a new one. I said, hey, Chom, you know it's the same installment, but you're going to pay it for another 5 years. So it is more help. It's just, why? So just like on cars, and maybe you're sitting here and, I don't know, maybe you're living in a house that you shouldn't be living in because it's too expensive. And if you just live in a smaller house, just imagine how many people you can help. There's one guy that I work with, he said they needed a servant's quarters. Him and his wife worked, and his wife went back to work, so they wanted somebody, a living person that could help them. And he said it was the most expensive servant's quarters that he ever bought. It cost 2 million rand. I said, how did that happen? He said, no, because then they had to buy, their house didn't have one, and then they thought maybe we can buy a new house, because this house has got like a servant's quarters. And the new house was 2 million rand more expensive than their old house. And I said, are you demented? Build a new servant's quarters. Okay, it sounds stupid, but many times we make decisions around our personal finances about, that we are just so in debt. Maybe you're one of those people, you fall asleep very, very easily, but 2 o'clock in the morning you are up. Why? Because you've got this number of debt that is in your mind that you can't get rid of. Less people in this country more people need to figure out that they can live without debt. Otherwise, the resource allocation, what we need to restore hope, generosity will be locked up in the banking system, and we pay interest on it, as opposed to living free from debt. Maybe sometime we can talk about how to get free from debt. Just very quickly, 5 points if you want it. It's for free. No interest. If you want to get out of debt, number 1, save an emergency fund. Put 5,000, 6,000, 3,000, don't care what it is. If you want to get out of debt, first save money for an emergency fund. Why? Because things happen. The geyser breaks. The insurance doesn't pay out. Your car breaks. Kids get ill. The doctors are too expensive. Things happen. And if you don't have an emergency fund, guess what funds it? This little plastic thing called a credit card. If you want to get out of debt, first save for emergency fund. Figure out what your emergencies have been and save that. 5, 6, whatever 1,000 rand you need for an emergency. Then save money for 3 months worth of salary. Why? Because stuff happens in this country. Companies close, the amount of liquidations of not Africa, I'm not going to start a rumor. But there are people that will lose jobs in this economy. Save for 3 months worth of salary so that you can buffer yourself and your family. Save, not pull it out of your credit card, save it. Which means, okay, so then eat out less, for example. So you need to save it, you need to take it from somewhere. So after you have saved for emergency and you've saved 3 months worth of salary, then start paying off your debts. Take the smallest one first. Don't start with a big one. It just seems too big. Take the smallest one and pay that one off. And then move on to the next one. And move on to the next one. And move on to the next one. And pay it off. Number 4, even if you have to sell stuff to pay it off. That caravan, that boat, I don't know what you have that you use once a year, that you don't need, and maybe you also bought that on debt. Sell stuff and pay this thing off. And the last one is probably the best one. Then don't get more debt. The sooner people get out of debt, the more they go back to debt. It's like a fix that we need to get. Okay, the last point that I just want to make. The last point that I want to make is being generous comes with risks. Okay? And I made the point earlier, I'm not advocating here to be generous and just to throw money at people and just to get over it and to deal with the guilt. I'm saying smartly. Who knows what the prayer is, the most prayed prayer of a teenager? The most prayed prayer of the teenager. Thank God for food. That's one. So, in my opinion, the most prayed prayer of teenagers is, Lord, please protect us, protect me from the good intentions of my parents. You can have many good intentions and be generous about it and open your hands and so on, and then have more problems that you give. Good intentions. So, for example, I had this good intention of my daughter turned 14, and we said, okay, so you haven't had a party for a while. You always, things happen in April, and kids are away. you can have a party. And I foolishly said, whatever party you want, within a budget, we can do. Within a budget, don't relax. Within a budget, we can do. And she said, Dad, I want to have a dance party. So I said, but that's going to be peculiar because, there's going to be only girls. And then she said, no. There's going to be boys as well. I'm like, oh my goodness, okay. So I went to my wife and I said, you have to sort this one out. I'm not going to have 20 boys in the house. And she said, okay, but she's 14, it's dance party, we'll be there. Against my well wishes, we then had this party. Andreas with the DJ, he put a playlist together, we had speakers, everything. Okay, so then, but I was like aggro. I'm the dad, there's going to be 20 boys in this house. And then we were standing in the kitchen and Nina came running in. This is sort of a half an hour into the party. Nina comes running in. She said, Dad, there's problems. I'm like, show him to me and I'll take him out. Wherever that boy is, I'm going to take him out by the knees. She says, no, Dad, relax, it's not boys. The problem is that the boys are playing soccer. They are not dancing. I said, okay, so we need to now make a plan. So what we said we'd do is I took one of Nina's friends and we started dancing. And Miko, the little one, danced with my wife. And Andreas, our son, started dancing with Nina. And the music was loud and it was horrible music. You can't whistle to it. It's like... bah, bah, bah. But so we danced the first dance and then it started getting nice. And I danced the second dance and then Nina came up to me and she pulled me on the shirt and she said, okay, that's enough now. Your good intentions you can now take away. And then the boys came and they danced. Okay, so good intentions, you can go overboard. Good intentions, you can go overboard. I will not lend money to people that drive a car that they can't afford. So now people come to you and now they say, lend me money. Or people that are too lazy to work. And now they come and they take money to you. So many times people talk about black tax. So black tax is this family paid for this one to go and study, and now this one needs to repay and now service everybody that don't have work or don't want to work. Okay, we've got white tax as well. It just comes in a different form, with a different source of guilt. Kannete. Really. I will not lend money to people that are not willing to go through that 5-point plan of getting out of debt first. As an example. We call them manipulators. You can't have an authentic, Andy Stanley says a smart thing. He says you can't have an authentic relationship with somebody that always wants something from you. We call them manipulators. Those people that when they put a light bulb into the wall or into a socket, they just put it in and they stand and they wait for the world to revolve around them. Don't lend them money. There are certain people that you don't want to lend. And then, unfortunately, it comes with risk. So I'm not with my head in the clouds. We had the occasion the other day. We called it Street Store. So a lot of people in our community came together and they gave their clothes, not their stick in the hut things, like nice clothes. Gave nice clothes throughout the country. And Street Store is a concept where you have pop-up stores, like in the middle of the streets or somewhere. You pop it up and you cordon it off, and then the people that live in the streets have the opportunity, you size them, and it's like you male, female, everything. And then what they do is, like we did it in Hatfield, around the country on that day, there was 18,000 people that were given clothes. And it's an amazing shopping experience where us and our kids, you take somebody by the hand, you introduce yourself, and then you shop with them. Many times they've never had the opportunity to shop. They just, they get. So you shop and you give and you walk through and you buy, and they've got this big packet that they can fill. So Miko, the little one, he said, Daddy, but I also want to walk with them. He was helping packing out, and I said, okay, so you go with this person. And he walked with this person and they shopped, and at the end of it, they walk out. And then we had an opportunity and said, listen, can I pray with you? And they said yes or no, whatever. So what happened with Miko, he walked out with this person, and then outside of the cordoned off area, this guy then said to him, okay, so yes, you can pray for me. Just come to the other side of the roads there where my friends are, and I'll pray with you. Good intention, risk. And then my child saying, I'm not allowed to, and then turning around and running back. And then him saying, okay, Daddy, this is what happened. I said, sure, you did a smart thing. And he said, okay, but I want to now help the next person. And I'm like, sure, okay. How are you going to do that? He says, no, I'll pray inside. I won't go outside. He made a plan. It comes with risk. Many of those people that got closed there, 4 of them in particular, the guy that helped us in the area, is the social worker in the area, just said, those 4 guys, they are on heroin and they will sell those clothes to get $30 a day to use the heroin. Okay, but there were 18,000 people that did not use heroin necessarily. But if you get trapped in that word of there's risk and people will waste it and so on and so forth, then also we're not going to do anything. I want us to maybe just close with this and Lamotte's quote. Hope begins in the dark. The stubborn hope that if you just show up and try to do the right thing, the dawn will come. You wait and watch and work, and you don't give up. Thanks.